Wealth Without Wall Street Tribe. So glad to bring back another fan favorite here. This is episode 4 in our book series that we recorded 4 years ago on R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Today, we cover the problem. And guess what? The problem is still the same today as it was before. You're going to want to listen in as we talk about volume and rate and all the many things. You can follow along in your book on page 17 and 18. Can't wait for you to take away the nuggets from this episode and let us know your comments. Go into the community, give us some feedback. Tell us what you loved about it and how you are using this to get to financial freedom. Let's dive into episode 4 of our book series right now.
Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, joined as always by Russ, the Idea Guy Morgan. Russ, we're going to continue our conversation. This is the book review of Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash.
Episode number 4 on this.
That's right. We got to continue the conversation. We're taking it bit by bit. This is the problem, page 19 and 20.
Yeah, the problem, one of the things that I love about this is that Nelson starts off with a pretty famous Bible verse, John 5:6. It says, do you want to get well? He's, in this part of the Bible, Jesus is talking to the person who's been sitting next to this healing spring.
Right.
And never seems to be the first one in the water once it's been stirred up to be healed. And he says to him, do you want to be healed?
Now, why would Nelson start off this section with a Bible verse? Especially this one.
Well, I think when you're talking about finance, we have to identify there is a problem. And a lot of times we're very prideful as individuals. I know I am. I struggle with that. That's a big issue in my life.
People already know there's a problem. Just like this guy was sitting there.
Problem with me or a problem with what?
Well, just in general, with finance, right? And this guy's sitting next to the well. He knows he has a problem.
He knows he has a well. He knows he's like, I can't get there fast enough. I can't be the first one in. But I think a big part of where Nelson is going with this is, are we willing to say, yes, I have a problem, and yes, I do want to be well?
Acknowledge it and make a change.
Yeah. So think about your finances right now. Where is it that you see a problem? Where are the things that you could be improving on? And today's lesson was going to be on talking about how he broke down an area of finance that really, I think, has gotten really thrown out of whack. And we're talking about rates, and we're going to get into whether or not what rate we should be getting on our money, what rate should we be paying for our debts, and all this different things. But to start off with, it's really, do we want a solution? Are we willing to accept the problem? And I know that you're listening to this and you're like, yes, that's the reason I'm here. But there's a lot of your friends and people that you talk to on a regular basis. That's probably one of the biggest struggles that they have when you're trying to share this with them, is that sometimes they don't believe there's a problem.
Well, they either don't believe there's a problem, or they have listened to and they've been lulled to sleep by, you guessed it, the Wall Street mindset. We have talked about this on numerous occasions. This is the whole reason that Wealth Without Wall Street exists, is to continue to uncover these lies and these things that have been taught to us that just are not true.
Yeah, let's break out of that mindset that, and I think today we're gonna break open Willie Wall Street's rate monster.
Absolutely. Okay, rate monster. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, think about that. Really, if in this book, Nelson starts talking about, if you get the all-American person, right? You get the all-American person. They're young. They start making money, and you got to think this book was written in year 2000.
That's right.
And it says this individual's in their late 20s, and they're making $28,500 now. You and I were having a discussion about that. Like, one of the hard parts sometimes when people read his book, one, they forget this book was 19 years old, right? So some of the numbers are a little out of whack. And they're like, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me. But
well, they just immediately discount it because of those things.
Yeah. But I remember 2000 is when I left Auburn. That's when I graduated from college. I took a job as a management trainee position at this little enterprise rent-a-car there in Columbus, Georgia. And I was making about $28,000 a year. So I'm thinking like 2000. Yeah.
So he interviewed you for this part of the book.
Yeah. Well,
he wrote it about you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that he got right about that. Right. But it said, I relate to where he is as he's talking about these numbers, the all-American person making $28,500, the majority of the money going out. I think he said 40% was going to living, right?
That's right.
30% was going to housing.
45 on living.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, give me the numbers then. You got them sitting in front of me.
So he did 20% on autos, 30% on housing, and 45% on living. But then he said, but let's see if you could live off of 40. So you were right. Let's see if you can live off 40 so you can save that remaining 10%, which we know
Did you hear what
true.
Joey just said?
What?
Repeat that last statement you said.
What? That you were right.
Okay, good. I just needed it on the record for twice. All right. So 40% for living, 30% for housing, and then 20% for autos. And then he said he knows that the average person is spending more than that. I give you credit back. And they're really only saving maybe 5%.
Yeah, if they're lucky.
But if he gives them, say, hey, I'm going to let them, for lifestyle, only spend 40, then they're saved 10. So he really starts thinking about, like, if you get this person together with all their friends, they're sitting around the table, they're talking about money, what is it that they're going to start focusing on?
What rate should I be getting on the money I'm saving?
Let me tell you how good my 401k's done in the last 5 years.
Exactly.
Right? Let me tell you about this.
Russ?
Yeah. It's strong to quite strong.
To quite strong.
Right. That's where he says the conversation is going to be. And so really what he's identifying is that out of 100% of the money is coming in, how much are they putting away? 10%. And what are they focused on? What that 10% is doing.
Right.
But they have completely forgotten the 90% that's leaving their hands and what it's costing them to have that on an ongoing basis.
So I'm going to point this out. Right out of the gate, he's saying the focus is on the wrong place. The focus is on interest rates. Now, again, I'm going to point to that as Wall Street has taught us to do that. And this is coming from me, my background in mortgage. This was probably one of the hardest things for me to really take in. This section, I'm just going to be honest with you. When I read this book for the first time, I see these 2 pages and I'm like, immediately start discounting the entire book, just being honest, because of the things he puts in there about interest rates. I'm like, realistically, I'm not paying 20% of my income towards auto loans. I pay cash for cars.
Right.
That was my initial thought, right? And maybe some of you are listening and thinking the same thing. But then he expands on it. He says, you're either paying by charge card or bank notes, they're financed, these items, or the balance is financed by paying cash for them. Okay, so I needed to get myself in check there right out of the gate. The second thing, he starts talking about how the automobile is financed. He says, oh yeah, the typical finance cost for automobiles is $10,550 for 48 months with an interest rate at least 8.5%. Well, I mean, we're here in the later 2010s, 2015, all that. Rates are not 10%, 8.5%. They're like 3%, 2.9, whatever. I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's trying to inflate something unnecessarily to prove his point. And I'm just being honest. This is what I'm thinking because I'm the mortgage guy. I'm sitting there seeing interest rates every day, all day. I have bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Well, and it's funny because you and I, as we were prepping for this podcast, what did we do? We went and typed in historical auto rates.
Yep.
The Federal Reserve's, graph shows up. We go and click on it, and what did we see? What interest rates were in 2000?
They were like 10%.
It's showing
average.
The average 48-month loan in 2000 was right around 10%, according to the Federal Reserve. So that's just where Nelson went and got these numbers. It wasn't like he made them up, but some people weren't paying 10%. Some people may have been paying 6% at that point in time. I don't remember. That's way too long ago, right? I mean, that's the part that, we apply today's information. And as we dig into this, I think what we're going to see is that Willie Wall Street, has changed the way we think about rates from an expense. So one of the things we know that the Federal Reserve has done what with interest rates since the year 2000?
Oh, they dropped it like a rock because they're trying to, get this economy going.
Yeah, they're trying to stimulate the economy. Most people don't realize what's going on there is that, we not only have they been printing money, which is creating inflation,
right?
Means that but more money creates more money in the marketplace, means that the cost of goods are going up. But also by doing that is forcing us to spend and not save, because whenever you have low interest rates, they're trying to stimulate the economy, trying to tell people, go buy something. It's cheap. Go buy something.
Don't save.
Yeah, don't save. And there is a real issue, is that when we look at this from a problem standpoint, the problem is that we don't have capital. We addressed that in the last episode.
Right.
That we can't be afraid to capitalize our system. Businesses don't fail because they have too little capital.
That's right.
So when he's addressing what is the problem, the main problem is that interest rates, we've started focusing on trying to save a little percentage of our money as possible and trying to focus on what rate of return can that little percent get for me.
That's right. And so I'm gonna point out the next thing that Nelson talks about is the problem is not the rate or the APR. Again, these are all things that we all know because we've been trained to look for them. He said it's the volume. And so when he really breaks this down, he says that, he gives the example of the shot, which I love this. He said, a shot is given to you with no real regard to the rate at which it's applied, but the volume is life or death. Right? The amount of that shot, too little, it's ineffective. Too much, it could kill you. Mm-hmm. So that is the most important piece about, in this case, medicinal purposes. But we talk about from the average American household, he really starts breaking it down as to what we're actually spending out of each dollar towards finance costs. So let's talk through that.
Well, it's about volume, not rate. We talk about, even in the last episode, we talked about velocity, right?
Right.
How fast can we get all of this going, right? The more times a bank is not interested in charging you the highest rate. What are they interested in? How many times can they do it? The volume of transactions, the velocity of those transactions working. So the same thing's true here, is where should we be focused? Should we be focused on the interest rate that I can buy a car at, or I can buy a home at, or whatever else I can finance? I mean, he goes in to say, if you go down to a local car dealer and you ask them what percentage of cars that are bought have been paid off before they trade in, and he says it was like 70% of cars that have been traded in are still have a balance on them. And he says then you go down and you go to the real high dollar car dealerships, right?
Yeah.
And you say what percentage of the cars here are leased versus finance? And he says that number gets way on up there, maybe 75% or more.
Yeah, and just to correct you, he was saying 95% of the cars that are turned in have not been paid off, not 70. So you're off there. But that's crazy.
I knew it was going to come back. If I said earlier,
I mean, I had to correct you. Okay, sorry,
it was coming. Well, but the point is that if people are focused on the rate, the price, right? That's kind of how can I get the smallest price? There's where lease comes in.
That's right.
And I know that, I don't think he addresses it here, but I can remember in his seminars he would do this. He'd say, let's think about this, right? There has to be an owner. The owner is the person either is going to borrow the money from someone else and own the car and drive it themselves, or they're going to be the ones who get the car and then rent it to someone else. He says, if you can lease a car and it's a good deal, then that means the owner is losing money.
And that deal never works out that way. That equation never works.
So how is it that the owner's losing money? It wouldn't
continue if it did work that way. It'd be short lived.
It should be short lived. Now I know you got a rental property that seems like maybe the renter's getting a better deal. Than
you mean the one that has holes in the drywall and you can see the neighbor upstairs right now?
Yeah, that's no good. So sometimes the renter may be getting a better deal. I don't know. That they're the one living in the house with the hole.
Some people would say I'm underwater, both literally and figuratively on that deal.
But he's basically breaking out kind of logically that can't work. But sometimes that's what happens. We lease cars because we go, man, this is the cheapest price, right? It's a smaller payment. So then if I don't spend an extra $200 or $500 a month for this car payment, then I can be saving it. I've got to be winning.
That's right.
And he says, well, but the reality is that it can't be, because if that was the case, if renting was always better than owning, then nobody would ever own.
That's right. Well, and let's break this down, because you may be like me. When I first started learning about this, I really was stuck in this idea. But okay, understand interest rate may not be the most important thing, but that's really what was driving me to say, am I doing what's best for my family? Right? If I could be saving more, like you said, maybe there's a better interest rate somewhere else. And of course, I was trained because I'm in the mortgage business. I'm seeing them all day long, every day. Well, if I was paying 6% on my mortgage and I could be paying 4%, shouldn't I take advantage of that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're not discounting the fact that we're also be stewards of the debt. In this case, a mortgage is a big debt. You're not necessarily going to pay it off anytime immediately. So we want to take advantage of that. So I'm not discounting that. But if that is the thing that you're so focused on, you may be missing the bigger picture, is what Nelson's talking about here.
Well, he said if you're only focused on trying to get the smallest rates on what you're spending and then trying to get the highest rate of return on the little, because he's not saying that having a mortgage is a bad idea.
That's right.
What he's saying is that our focus is, okay, I want to buy as much houses, much cars. I want to have the biggest and best of things I possibly can. And I'm going to spend 90% of all the dollars I have toward those things. And then I'm going to take this little amount and I'm trying to get the highest rate of return. So what he's saying is we got to change our focus. Internally, we can't go, man, I want the highest rate of return on my littlest amount of money. Because if you took it and said, well, if I could earn 3 or 4% on 90% of all the dollars that come in,
right,
in comparison to earning 20% on the 10% of the dollars that I'm trying to save, which one would be a bigger number?
I'm going to go with the 90% earning 3 to 4%.
Exactly. Well, we think about that, all the dollars that we've spent over time versus what those dollars that we have saved, the little that it's actually accumulated. Because most of the time when people look in their account balances, they see big numbers, but if they went and subtract out everything they put in them, what's left over is pretty small.
That's right.
It's minuscule. But what is it that we focus on? So that's kind of the whole thing is, shouldn't we know what's really happened so that we can really know what to do going forward?
That's right. And I think this is a perfect time to introduce his idea of the airplane example. Okay. So let's break down what he's talking about in the book. The volume of interest that the American family is putting towards debt, or the finance charge of all the things that we either finance through a bank or, like he says, finance by paying cash. Again, if that's unclear to you, we've got the video in the show notes about the true cost of paying cash. Watch that. You'll get all the numbers that your little heart desires, because guess what? I need to be proved that just like everybody else. Go watch that. But let's just assume what Nelson is talking about. 34.5% of every dollar the American family is leaking towards finance costs. Okay. He breaks it down in this area into auto, into mortgage and living expenses, but 34.5% is going out the door. And he points out we were saving 10%, again, on an aggressive scale.
Well,
so break down what he's talking about on the airplane.
But that's a really, if you took the percentage of your mortgage payment, subtracted out the principal, and you said, okay, how much of that is interest? It's probably close to 85% unless you've been in your home for 10 or 15 years, right?
Yeah, because he does point out the first 5 years is when people start to move it or refinance it.
It's always
so it is the volume of that.
And you know that you were in the mortgage business. Your job was to get them to refi, right?
Oh man, it was to their benefit. Of course.
But also the same thing with cars, credit cards, everything else. So what he's isolating is the volume of every payment. What percentage of that total payment is actually interest? And he says it's about 34.5 cents of every dollar. The net dollar comes into the household is going out for finance charges. And he said, okay, let's take that and compare it to them trying to save just 10%. And so he flew airplanes his whole life. Yeah. And so he would use these great analogies to help you identify it. And he said, if I was in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was going to Chicago, Illinois, so if you get on the map, you look at that, you're going to see Chicago is almost due north from Birmingham. And he said, imagine that there's this highs and lows across the U.S. and those things move in a counterclockwise motion. And he says, I'm going to make the wind, right? This wind that's going to be moving from left to right, from west to east, as what all of these highs and lows do. He said, imagine that thing is set up right. Just the front edge right over the top of Birmingham and Chicago. So that means that wind current is basically coming down from Chicago straight at Birmingham. And that would be the 34.5%. So he just said
345 miles per hour.
Let's make that miles per hour. So that'd be 345 miles per hour. And imagine your airplane is what you're saving. That's your 10%. So let's add a zero. That means your airplane can fly 100 miles an hour. So if you're trying to get to Chicago, flying an airplane at 100 miles an hour to a 345 mile an hour headwind, what would really be happening?
You're going backwards.
You're heading toward Miami at 245 miles an hour.
Exactly.
So the best thing you could do is what?
Just land the plane. Just stay where you're at.
Get on the ground as quickly as possible. Evaluate the situation. He said, now, here's the thing is that highs and lows moves a little bit. It gets centered right over the top of you where there is no wind. And he said, this is where people who are listening to some of the other financial gurus talk about get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt, say, oh, can't be any better. There is no headwind. There is no interest because I'm paying cash for everything, right?
Right.
And so now I'm covering the ground at 100 miles an hour. I'm heading towards Chicago. What could be better than that? And he said, then you get them together. What do they start talking about? Man, maybe I can make my airplane go 105 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make it go 110. Now we start stressing that airplane a little bit.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out how does this all connect into my own personal system.
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS. There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, pop quiz day. Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
But before you continue that same conversation is happening not only when you've paid off all the debts. Let's say that guy that has no headwind, tailwind, he's in that kind of neutral environment going 100 miles an hour. It's also happening when that headwind is still present. Okay, so don't discount that. Someone is in that airplane saying, man, you know what? It feels like I'm going backwards right now. I've got this 345 miles pushing me backwards. I wonder if I can make this thing go 115.
Yeah, I probably have way too much in debt. I'm financing everything that I'm buying. I'm leasing stuff. Everything I look at, I'm just leveraged to the hilt with no backup, no reserve. But you know what I'm going to do? Instead of creating reserve, I'm going to try to stress my airplane out. I'm going to try to stress my savings and see if I can't get 15% on my money,
in my
20% of
401k.
my money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they put it into it. That's the biggest problem that I see in here is that the solutions given to people is like, oh, if you put it in a checking account, you get nothing. So that like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I don't want to have this cushion because I know it's costing me. But then what are they taught is to put it in places they can't touch, but to try to get these great rate of returns. So then both scenarios are not good. One, I'm stressing it. Secondly, I can't touch it. So you're looking at this environment and you say, man, this is not a good place for me to be playing.
That's right. I didn't want us to miss that point because that same conversation, that guy that was thinking he's, won the day by paying off all his debt and paying cash for everything is the same conversation that person that's dealing with debt and they're still trying to get ahead and it's not getting them anywhere close. So then let's talk about the last environment he's talking about.
So he says if this high moves over, and they always do, now this thing is set up where the circulation is actually moving from Birmingham toward Chicago, right?
Right.
Imagine this circle, this wind motion, and now that 345 mile an hour wind becomes a tailwind.
Right. Pushing that airplane forward.
Pushing the airplane. So now my airplane that flies at 100 miles an hour is being pushed at 345, and I'm covering the ground at 445. And he says, man,
that's a pretty big difference.
Now think about that. What is it though? So explain that. What is it that's really, what is he saying is happening there?
So what he's saying is that by taking over that banking function of financing everything that you buy by paying cash, but now through your own banking function. Okay. And so the cash flows don't change. Right? The cash flow of money going out the door for the same things we're going to purchase, the same things that we're going to buy, living expenses, all those things don't change. They're just now in an environment that you own and control. And that interest that you were paying somewhere else, either by lost opportunity or by finance charge, is now pushing you forward. You now own and control that environment.
And isn't it just a process? Like there's no magic to this. I mean, sometimes people want to know like, where's the catch within this? And you're probably telling people that you know about what you're doing with your policies. And they're like, where's the catch? There's not a catch. This is like basic finance 101. The thing is that people are trying to find magical ways to do things, and they start focusing on the wrong issues. And what people do, the old adage, I'll buy term and invest the difference, but it's really I'll buy term and I'll spend the difference.
Right.
What Nelson's showing is this is a process of human behavior, and we need to create a way to avoid it. So we have to, one, identify there's a problem, and two, let's create a solution. So if I borrow money against my insurance contracts and I create a system to repay it, right? There is a process to do that. It's not just like, oh, well, if I have extra money, I'll do it. No, there's a system. We're going to actually follow a process to put the money back in. So now all of that extra money, that 34.5 cents or the 345 in the airplane analogy, is now going toward us. Well, if we're saving 10% and we're putting that back too, that's just going to propel us across the ground. And he says, it looks really good when you see that 445, but when everybody else is going backwards at 245,
that's a dramatic difference.
Because everything we do is compared to what everyone else is doing.
That's right.
And we're going to be in a position so much better. So when the market turns, which it will again, there's going to be the people who are going backwards at 245 are going to be in a world of hurt. But those of us who've put ourselves in a position, we're capitalizing systems, we got cash, we're not over leveraged, and things start going backwards, we're going to have the ability to pick up those pieces, and that's going to help us cover the ground even faster as well.
That's right. And I think the key thing is actually right at the very end of this section on page 20, on page 18. I was mentioning the wrong pages earlier. He talks about the most important things that we can do. And I'm just going to read it because I feel like it'll do justice for us to do that. Somehow or another, it never dawns on most financial gurus that you can control the financial environment in which you operate. Perhaps it is caused by lack of imagination. We've talked about that before. But whatever the cause, learning to control it is the most profitable thing that you can do over a lifetime. So my whole takeaway from this, and what I think he's trying to say, is that the environment and the control of it is the absolute most important thing that we have to learn to control. And the learning part is what we're going to get to here in just a second. So let's talk through some practical things that we can do as a result of what he's saying.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think, I read this. I realized that, look, I didn't make a whole lot of money when I first got out of college, and things have changed. I can remember my wife being super frugal. Like literally, we could have built houses out of the cardboard boxes that we get coming from Amazon today. That would be equivalent to the housing that I think my wife had me living in early on in our marriage. Right, she was super frugal, and as time has gone on, I mean, we've been blessed, and we spend more money and all those sort of things. So I get it, right? And I know that, as we make more money, we're going to spend more, and we got to have a process for that. We have to have a way to get this tailwind. Now, after doing this for 10 years, Joey,
right?
10 years, and you've heard me say this on the podcast before, I've expanded my system to 19 policies, right? There's a lot of things I've done wrong in 10 years. But there's
I can account for that. Yeah.
There's been some really good things that's happened as a part of this learning and creating this environment. And the goal is, I read a book a long time ago, George Clayton's book, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Oh, classic. Yeah.
We're going to have to do a podcast on this because I think this is a great book. But one of the things I remember stood out to me is that he was saying, you got to start your purse to fattening, meaning that his concept was you have to save at least 10%. But if you have debts, you should live off 70% of what you bring in, and the other 30% should be going towards your savings and to getting rid of them. And so I've tried to keep that number in my head as, what percentage of the money that I bring in should I be shoving toward these insurance policies? And then slowly but surely taking loans against those insurance policies to get rid of those debts that have been accumulated. But if I can live off 70%, and ultimately have that 30% moving in my favor. Nelson's is 34.5. So maybe I need to up my ante a little bit here, because that was kind of my starting point, was off that Richest Man in Babylon book, which was 30%. And Nelson's just saying 34.5. Either one of those are really good goals, but do we have that goal? Are we looking at our finances and saying, I'm going to create a system or expand my system to meet at least 30% of my income that comes in? I'm going to make it handle that functionality, because there lies the ability for us to get a tailwind, ability for us to get out of that headwind scenarios, that we've built a place where we have enough money to do it. Because I think the problem is that whenever we're only trying to put in a little small amount, we don't have enough to take over those debts.
That's right. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is, just practically from what Nelson mentioned, is you should control the environment. The first step of that is, can I live off of 70%? And then what do I do with that 30%? Because one of the most common questions I get from people every day is, how much should I fund this policy with? What's the form? Is there a formula? What percentage should I be saving? And I think this is a really good practical thing for us to all have as a goal. If you're already there, then you can expand beyond it, obviously. But 30% is what should be going into our own system so that we can create that tailwind, like you said.
I think it's very easy when you got a book that's 100 years old telling you to do that in The Richest Man in Babylon. I think that's a good place to start, right? There's a financial book that has continue to excel. But what's really happened is everybody's jumped onto this 10% bandwagon because they really want to spend 90%.
Well, the Federal Reserve has taught us not to save.
Yeah, I mean, all the books out there are really trying to say, hey, well, you need to live off more and focus on trying to earn greater returns on your 10%. And it's gotten us derailed from the really simple way of doing this whole thing. So let's control the environment. Let's set up a process, expand it, whatever it needs to be to practically hold 30% of our cash flow.
Yeah, so do the math on that. If what you're putting into your system right now is 5% of your income, and that's the max you can possibly do, start thinking bigger. Imagine, how could I get to 30%?
Right.
And call us. Let's talk through that. Let's strategize.
And maybe the easiest part of this is that maybe we're only putting in 5% because we're taking another 10 or 15 to pay off debts. Well, if we're following this process, why would we not put in the 20 and take out the money and start paying off the debts through that? Because are we not going to then have a system and a process to put it back?
Yeah, we need to do a case study on that, by the way.
For sure. All right. Step 3 is learning how to control that environment. And one of the last things he says in here, he says that controlling the environment may be the most profitable thing you can do over a lifetime.
Actually learning to control that environment. So setting up the environment is important. Control it. That's the first step. And then expanding it, or imagine. He talks about imagination, but the last one is learning. So how are we going to continue to learn?
So that comes with a very cool thing that we've been working on for a while, isn't it?
That's right.
You've heard us probably back in, I guess it was maybe February, we did a podcast on community.
That's right.
And we kind of did a little flyer out there saying, hey, community is a wonderful thing. We've got a beautiful thing we call the Wealth Council that is a closed group that our clients get to participate in. But we've got a lot of people saying, I want to participate in that too. Or you have friends that you want to be able to tell about it, but you know that we don't let them in the closed group. Well, we're going to expand that out because I believe learning starts with giving of our own knowledge to other people and also gaining from those other people. So I want you to go to community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. You're going to be able to sign up and get access to when it's rolling out. It's coming.
Right. This is early access.
Yeah. You're going to be able to get access
pre-launch.
To this information. And because when it comes, we're going to make sure if you say, hey, I want to be a part of this, this is what I want to get. I want to be able to ask Q&A of the podcast guests that you guys have on here. I want to be able to, get information from people all across the country who are doing infinite banking, who are buying real estate. I mean, think about some of the cool things that people in our Wealth Council have been talking about lately.
Yeah. I mean, you cannot imagine, that pun is totally intended, what people are putting their systems and their environments at work doing. Just the other day, I had a client call me and say, man, I'm buying a laundromat, existing laundromat. One, I never thought about something like that, but this is going to create over $6,000 a month in passive income for him.
That's what? Cool.
That's crazy.
Well, think about we had some questions in our Wealth Council the other day talking about buying storage units.
Right. Those are things that exist, but if you're not in an environment where people are sharing these ideas, you're missing it. You're not going to expand and continue to learn how to expand that environment.
Well, to me, that goes back to the process of rates. If the people were sitting around the water cooler that's what he's talking about in the book early on, is that they're going to be talking about what are they doing with the 10%. If you're sitting around a water cooler, virtual water cooler, right? a digital community of people that are like-minded, and you're talking about what can you be doing with the 90%, who do you think is going to, remember everything was compared to whatever everybody else is doing, who do you think is going to be covering the ground at a faster rate?
Yeah, we are.
No doubt. So go to community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. You're going to be able to get access, whether depending on when you're listening to this, it may be, hey, sign me up because I want you guys to email me and let me know this is coming. Or when you listen to this, it may be live. You may be saying, man, what's in here? I want to jump in. I want to start seeing what's going on in here on a daily basis. And we know this is going to continue to grow, but our goal and objective is going to be to constantly build community with you so that you guys can connect with each other. We're going to add value from all of our strategic partnerships that we have. We're not going to be the target as what Facebook is, right? We're not going to have ads bombarding us to try to buy things constantly.
Yeah, this will be outside of Facebook. That's why.
Yeah, this is just going to be a total collaborative effort for you to be able to get access to some of the things that people pay tens of thousands of dollars to go listen to. You're going to be able to get this stuff on a weekly, daily basis and be able to connect with people that I think will be great relationships and resources for you down the road.
But you got to come with the mindset that if I give 50%, I will gain 50%. If you come just looking to get,
Yeah.
you're going to miss it.
Yeah,
You're going to miss out.
You won't be happy, right? Because this is not
just like Nelson.
Yeah, this is not going to be Russ and Joey, putting a blog post in there every single day or 5, videos every week. That's not going to happen. We're going to have lots of hot seat stuff, lots of Q&A. There's going to be lots of value added by our strategic partnerships on a regular basis. But I think the main value is going to be what's going to be you giving to the group. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm trying this. I have problems with this. And then the group giving back and it being just this ebb and flow constantly. And there's where we're going to have, because when we're sitting there and we're thinking about these ideas together, our imaginations will get fired up. And I know that we're going to excel and get closer to our ultimate objective, which is financial freedom at a much faster pace than if we were not in a group or community like this.
Yeah, we're going to create the tailwind that you're talking about, the 445 miles an hour. All right. So if you're listening to this and you say, okay, Joey, I've never even set this up to begin with, we need to go ahead and have a call. Go to freecall.wealth.wallstreet and we'll be happy to meet with you. One of our advisors, we're happy to meet with you and walk you through this. This was the problem book review. We're going into the next section next time, creating a bank like the ones you already know about. So stay tuned on that. Don't forget to go to sign up for our community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. And don't forget the videos. We've got 2 really cool videos in the show notes. One on the true cost of paying cash. And the second is going to be on the max potential to show the problem in real numbers. So you can see, wow, what am I leaving on the table? Okay. This has been an awesome review. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you next time.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.